So we chose the cell plant, and the analogy would be a greenhouse owned by a man named Gary.
A man named Gary being the nucleus because he's the center of the whole operation in this story, decided to move to the spacious mountains of Calgary, Canada, where he decided to live. The main issue is that the closest supermarket was 3 hours away, so Gary decided to build a greenhouse. The greenhouse and the interior of it is the cytoplasm of the whole cell to farm the crops he needs. Gary immediately began researching greenhouses, and all the information went into his brain being the nucleolus, which is protected by his skin and skull, which are the nucleoplasm and the nuclear envelope. After he got all the information he needed, he began to build his greenhouse. The greenhouse had strong metal walls. In this case, they're the cell membrane, because they protect everything within the cell that will shelter the plants from the harsh weather. These strong metal walls have components of both the cell wall and the cell membrane. They are the cell wall because they provide the structure and protect the plant from the harsh weather, but they are also the cell membrane because they have a big part in deciding what goes in and out of the greenhouse. The greenhouse is built outside so we can get sunlight that will then fuel the solar panels. The sunlight is the chloroplast and the solar panels are the mitochondria. The sunlight is the chloroplast because it gives the solar panels a source to be able to make energy. Chloroplasts make glucose that the mitochondria use to make ATP, which is cellular energy. And eventually the crops. The soil is the endoplasmic reticulum because the endoplasmic reticulum holds the ribosomes that make the protein from the mRNA. The soil holds the seeds, which are the mRNA, because they house the information that the ribosomes or stems of plants need in order to make a certain crop or protein. So, since the soil houses the seeds, stems of plants, and crops, it is much like the endoplasmic reticulum that holds the ribosomes that get the mRNA in order to make a certain crop, which is the protein. They're given water and excess nutrients from Gary, who pulls out watering cans that have special chemicals in the water that help the plants grow, from a storage bin, which is much like a vacuole in a plant cell, which houses the excess water in the cell and has the excess ions and nutrients that a plant cell needs. There will be several bags of seeds that separate the different kinds of plants that will be grown in the future. The bags or seeds resemble DNA in plant cells because Gary's brain, which is the nucleolus, will decide which of the seeds or that are in a specific bag will be planted, much like how the nucleolus uses DNA to make mRNA that will then decide which plant or crop is grown. In this corner, there is also a bottle of weed killer that will be used to kill all of the excess plants that might grow and harm the crops. This weed killer is to resemble peroxisomes in plant cells because peroxisomes also detoxify the plant cell by getting rid of the phosphoglycolate that is a byproduct of photosynthesis that could potentially destroy a plant cell. Much like how weeds can destroy crops, the weed killer destroys the weeds, much like how the peroxisomes destroy the phosphoglycolate. These containers that will be in the greenhouse that will kind of organize the crops and put them in certain stations are much like the Golgi apparatus, which when proteins enter are then given tags or added onto in order to be the certain protein that they need to be, much like how the crops are organized in these bins to go where the wheelbarrow is used in a greenhouse in order to move around certain crops to specific places, much like how vesicles in plant cells move proteins to the Golgi apparatus or other places in the cell where they are needed to go. Also, an anaerobic digestion system that reuses the waste made in the greenhouse, much like how lysosomes reuse dead pieces of organelles and many proteins or byproducts that are
in the cytoplasm in order to be used in other cellular activities. And this has been our analogy on how plant cells are much like greenhouses.